Around dusk one night in the winter of 1974, a young man ran into the local pub and shouted that he had just found his parents shot dead in their bedroom. Well, later on, he'd say that he suspected it was a mafia hit. Eventually, he said that he had killed his parents, but it really wasn't his fault. See, the devil made him do it.
Greetings, Rope Peeps. This week, we're continuing our series on remastered TSO videos. And this video combines two of my favorite topics, true crime and ghostly encounters. And if you watched our recent Cokeville Miracle video, you know that I've had a ghostly experience of my own. So grab some popcorn and your favorite drink and enjoy the video.
The house at 112 Ocean Avenue, Long Island, New York, is perhaps the most famous haunted house in all of the United States. There have been dozens of books written about it, and tens of millions of copies have been sold. There have been over 50 movies made about the house, and people are split right down the middle as to what really went on there. The town itself has an interesting history. Amityville actually means town of friendship, and it was formed in the late 1600s. Will Rogers and Annie Oakley once lived there, and during the Depression, so did Al Capone. And at the time that this house became famous for a horrible, murderous massacre and supposed haunting activity, the sign hanging in the front yard, well, it read, "High Hopes." In this video, we're going to first go over the murders that took place in this house, and then we'll share what happened to the family who bought the house directly after the massacre. They claim that they experienced crazy demonic activity in the house. Their experiences in that house were so severe that they abandoned it, furniture and all, just 28 days after they moved in. Then we'll quickly touch on what the paranormal investigators have to say about the house. And then lastly, in our truth section, we'll reveal some little-known information about what probably really happened in that house, and it just might not have been demons after all. So, this story begins in the winter of 1974. About 6 p.m. on Wednesday, November 13, 1974, Ronald Joseph DeFeo Jr., a young 23-year-old who went by the nickname Butch, frantically ran into Henry's Bar on Merrick Avenue in Amityville and shouted that he needed help. He said that he had found his parents shot in their bedroom. Henry's Bar was a little pub where Butch and his friends would often meet and have drinks, and that evening, many of his friends were there. Well, this isn't something that one hears every day, so his friends and just about everyone else in the bar got up and followed him back to his house. Butch was visibly shaking when he got into his car, and several of his friends piled in with him. And of course, many others followed behind in their own cars. When they arrived at the house, everyone but Butch went inside. With a distraught and terrified expression on his face, he said that he was not going back in. Well, several people from the bar went into the house, and Butch had already told them which room to go to. So they went straight upstairs to the master bedroom, and they found Ronald DeFeo Sr. and his wife, Louise Marie DeFeo, shot face down in their beds. They were already dead. Joey Yezowit, one of Butch's good friends, called 911. Moments later, Amityville police arrived and they did the initial walkthrough. Butch's parents weren't the only ones who had been murdered. Whoever did this murdered Butch's entire family, his 4 siblings and his parents. It was a slaughter. Police confirmed a total of 6 victims. At this point, the Suffolk County Police were called in. Although Amityville had its own police department, Suffolk had a dedicated homicide division, and they took lead on the case. Shortly into the investigation, it was discovered that Mr. DeFeo had ties to the Gambino crime family. And everyone's first thought was, well, this might be some kind of a mob massacre. So for his own safety, Butch was taken out to the police station and held in protective custody. While he was there, of course, they asked him any insights that he might have. Well, the first thing that he said was that the notorious mafia hitman, Louis Fellini, had lived with the family a couple of years back. And during that time, he had had a terrible argument with Butch's father. And after that, Fellini held a grudge against the family, and he never let it go. And Butch was sure that Fellini was behind the murders. But something about his responses didn't sit right with the detectives. So they questioned him further. And of course, eventually they got around to asking him where he was and what he was doing during the time of the murders. Surprisingly, or not surprisingly, his alibi was extremely weak. After he was questioned, they let Butch sleep on a cot in a filing room in the back, and then they went over his statements. The more they reviewed his statements, the more convinced that they got that Butch, not Fellini, had committed the murders. Later, when he woke up, the first thing that he asked was whether or not they had caught Fellini yet. Well, they just shook their heads, cuffed him right there, and then read him his rights. Butch has claimed many things over the years. In the beginning, he was adamant that he had nothing to do with it, sticking to his story that the murders must have been done by Louis Fellini. But later on, he went all the way to the other end of the spectrum and said that he indeed was the one responsible, stating that, well, once he started, he just couldn't stop. This case, of course, would not be part of TSO's reports if it were just a normal murder case. Most certainly, the strangest thing that he said, and the one that echoed itself into the future, perpetuating the idea that a demon did indeed inhabit that house, was his statement that he heard voices, and the devil made him do it. But this, of course, was nonsense, and no one believed it. Well, that is, until the next family moved into the house. Just 13 months after the DeFeo family had all been massacred, on December 18, 1975, a young couple named George and Kathy Lutz purchased a home and moved in. And because of its past, the purchase price had been greatly reduced, and George and Kathy, who were now both on their second marriages, were super excited, couldn't wait to move in, and they were looking forward to building a bright new future in this big, beautiful home. The couple had 3 children, 2 boys and a girl. Danny was 9, Chris was 7, and little Missy was 4. Almost immediately after they moved in, the family began to experience strange phenomena in the house. At first, they didn't think much of it. A board creaking here, a noise over there, just normal house settling sounds, they thought. But as the days went on, this phenomenon got stranger and more terrifying. Finally, they asked Father Ralph Pecoraro to come out and bless the house.
I was blessing the sewing room. It was cold. It was really cold in there. I'm like, well, geez, this is peculiar, because it was a lovely day out. It was winter, yes, but it didn't account for the kind of coldness. While I was sprinkling holy water, I heard a rather deep voice behind me saying, "Get out." I was really quite startled. I felt a slap at one point on my face. Someone slapped me, and there was nobody there.
Father Pecoraro left the house in a hurry, not even stopping to say goodbye to the Lutzes. Later, when George went up to the sewing room, he found an exceptionally large amount of flies gathering near the window and spreading out across the room. Well, George sprayed the room with chemicals and killed all of the flies. But the next day, oddly, they all returned, and they brought their friends. So he sprayed the room again and again, and they just kept coming back, and each time there was more of them. It was like something out of a horror movie. During the entire time that the Lutzes lived there, they were never able to get rid of those flies. Not long after this, the Lutzes' daughter, Missy, developed an imaginary friend named Jody, and Jody did not like George Lutz at all. Like many children that age who have imaginary friends, Missy was adamant Jody was real. But this imaginary friend was a little different than most. Sometimes Jody was a sweet little girl, but sometimes, for some reason, Missy said that Jody was an evil-looking pig with red eyes. Now, that's unnerving. The first time that the Lutzes really began to suspect that there just might be something supernatural in the house was when they were downstairs late one night and they heard footsteps on the second floor. Well, they went upstairs thinking that they were going to catch their children awake and running around, but to their surprise, they found them all sound asleep. So they went back downstairs. But shortly after they did, the footsteps resumed. Well, this happened night after night and got louder and louder each time. Then one day, out of the blue, a strange black liquid was found dripping from one of the keyholes on the second floor. Well, George cleaned it up, but shortly afterward, that same strange liquid began appearing all over the house. It would be found on the walls, on the countertops, and even sometimes coming out of the faucets. Several times it filled the toilet bowls. It had a green tint to it, and it was sticky to the touch. No one ever did figure out exactly what it was. Sometimes George and Kathy would see a strange pig face in the shadows outside the window, staring into the house. When Missy saw it, well, she said, "Hey, there's my friend." And all of the while, as this was happening, George began feeling this overwhelming urge to murder his family. Well, that right there would have been it for me. I've been called out by several subscribers on this channel for saying how much I love Amy. But make no mistake about it, my family is everything to me. So, bye, see ya, wouldn't want to be ya. I'd be out that day and I wouldn't look back. The family claimed many, many more things like this happened while they were there, but I think all of that gives you the picture. Well, finally, one night things got really crazy. George woke up and felt something pinning him to the bed. And as he lay there unable to move, he heard loud banging noises coming from the other rooms. It sounded like someone was picking up large pieces of wood and slamming them down onto a hard floor surface. Later, he found out that those loud noises were his children's beds being levitated and then slammed back down repeatedly by some unknown force. While he was pinned there, listening to those loud banging sounds, the next thing he noticed was that his wife wasn't in bed with him. Well, he shifted his eyes, searching for his wife, and then he spotted her, but he couldn't believe it. She was floating off of the bed across the room and nearly touching the ceiling. Well, finally, the next day, and some even say that very night, but for sure the next day, Thursday, January 15th, 1976, just 28 days after they had moved in, the family moved out. And supposedly, they left all of their belongings behind. In the spring of 1976, Marvin Scott, an anchorman from Channel 5 News, called Ed and Lorraine Warren, self-proclaimed demonologists, and asked them if they would join him and a few other paranormal investigators at the Amityville house. The meeting was televised and it took place on March 6th. Ed said that when he first got there, he headed straight for the cellar, stating that he likes to start his investigations there because, according to him, evil hides and thrives in the dark. While he was walking down the steps toward the cellar, he was overwhelmed with a flood of negative energy. He said this invisible force started pressing down on his shoulders, and it nearly knocked him to his knees. The next moment, he felt a million tiny pinpricks all over his body, and then suddenly, he couldn't breathe. He said that it felt as if someone had wrapped a hot, wet towel around his face. Meanwhile, his wife Lorraine was heading upstairs, and she was surrounded by a camera crew.
As I'm going up the stairs, it was the worst feeling. It was like I was going against a tremendous pressure that was on my body. I stopped on the landing and held tight to the relic that was in my hand and asked for strength and direction in going forward. It seemed like my prayers were answered, and at one point, I continued on up the few stairs and turned immediately to my left and went into what was the sewing room.
Later, Ed stated that he invoked the same type of prayers that Lorraine did, and instantly the oppression that he was under was gone, and he could breathe again. While Lorraine was in the sewing room, she looked over at news anchor Marvin Scott, and she said that she hoped that this was as close to hell as she would ever get. Interestingly, outside of Ed and Lorraine and a few other paranormal investigators seemingly feeling this evil, nothing supernatural really happened that day. Later, Lorraine said that Amityville was the only house that they ever investigated where evil followed them home. I bet that you're familiar with this story, and I'm sure that you know that this story is highly controversial. There are people on both sides who are adamant in their beliefs. Many people believe that this house is, or at least really was, possessed by a demon. There's an eerie tale going around about how Butch DeFeo got possessed and then mindlessly killed everyone before finally coming out of his trance. It goes like this. Supposedly, in the early morning hours of Wednesday, November 13th, 1974, Butch was up in the TV room watching graphic, violent movies when all of a sudden, at exactly 3:15 a.m., his expression went blank. And then he heard these voices telling him to get his gun. So he slowly turned away from the TV and very mindlessly made his way to the cubbyhole where he had stashed a .35 caliber rifle. Well, he retrieved the rifle, but he did nothing else until these voices gave him his next command: kill your parents. Then, in a zombie-like state, he walked into his parents' bedroom and shot them both. Well, he stood there for a moment, actually rocking back and forth, and then the voices told him to go kill his brothers and sisters. So he turned, and one by one, he killed his siblings. Now, that's a crazy story, and it was Butch DeFeo who originally said that he had been possessed at the time that the murders took place. However, there is evidence that it was also perpetuated by George and Kathy Lutz. Story has it that one evening, Butch DeFeo's lawyer, Mr. Weber, came by the house. By this time, of course, George and Kathy had already moved in, and the three of them had several bottles of wine. As they sat there, enjoying the evening, talking about the murders, they concocted this crazy story in an attempt to make money. They cooked up the plan that they would continue the idea that Butch DeFeo had indeed been possessed. Then they could pretend to experience this demonic activity with them ultimately running out of the house, terrified. Well, in 1979, Weber actually went on camera with anchorman Marvin Scott and unequivocally stated that that was exactly what happened. It was all a hoax, and the demon possession, the haunting, everything else is just one big lie. Then, now, check this out. 29 years later, on September 17th, 2003, Butch DeFeo went before the parole board, and he revealed for the first time what he claims really happened. He said that his father had been physically abusive his entire life, and just days before the murders, his father had severely beaten him, black and blue. Well, that particular night, he and his sister had been up using heroin and drinking all night long downstairs. He most certainly was not up in the TV room alone. As the night went on, the conversation turned dark, and they started talking about how they just had to do something about this abuse. Butch said that the more that he drank, the more he realized he had to act. So, a little after midnight, not 3:15 in the morning, he went into his parents' bedroom and shot them both in their beds. Then he said that he left the house and went to the bar. When he finally came home, he found that for some reason, his sister had killed the other children. Well, that sent him into a fit of rage, so he shot her too. So, what do you think? Either way, it's a fantastical story. Was it demons? Was it Butch and his sister? Or was it just Butch himself? Amy and I would really like to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And as always, if you'd like to see more videos like this one, then please help us build this channel. Subscribe, hit the bell for all notifications, leave a like and comment, and most importantly, share this video with several people who you think might enjoy it. Thank you.